Alright, so here we go with our next video looking at the effects of the Industrial Revolution. Now we're going to look at industrial societies. So how does the Industrial Revolution affect people and societies? Well, for one thing is that the standard of living improved across society, meaning that there's more food available thanks to all the agrarian revolution stuff, more food available than ever before in industrialized societies, which means that less people are going to starve. It also means that food is going to be cheaper, cost less than ever before. So whether even if you're a super poor factory worker or a super rich billionaire factory owner, your cost of your standard of living is going to improve. Also, with the, as we mentioned before, with the mass production of goods, a lot of stuff is going to become cheaper to own. Clothing, for one, is going to drop in price. Textiles is going to drop in price. That means you can have more clothing than ever before, which means that people are now going to start identifying themselves through the fashion that they wear. Right, and you can start purchasing clothing to resemble clothing of an upper class person. So there's going to be this new kind of like identity that your clothes represent who you are. In the past, you wore whatever clothes your parents made for you because everything was handmade, and you didn't really care about, appearances. We're also going to see that the drop of goods of transportation is going to reduce. The cost of transportation is going to reduce. Again, this is part of the whole reduction in the food costs, because now it's cheaper to transport crops and food and vegetables and whatever, or beef, from one part of the country to another. Therefore, you can purchase it cheaper than ever before. We also see that, with the production costs dropping, with the mass production of goods, people are going to start buying furniture and electronics like radio players or light bulbs, right? Things that, half a generation before, 20, 30 years before wouldn't have happened. So we see, again, the standard of living for the average person gets better. And on top of that, they could travel. They can move. They can migrate. Right? I can go on vacation. I could get on a ship and sail to a faraway place and have a vacation if I could afford it. Or maybe get on a ship and travel to the coast to spend a nice long weekend with the family at the beach. These luxuries didn't exist before the Industrial Revolution. And again, this is made possible because it costs cheaper to travel, thanks to the steamship and the railroads, than ever before. So standard of living improved. Now, it doesn't mean that things got better for everyone equally. Some people benefited way more than others. So who are the new social classes of the industrial era? And these are going to kind of resemble what we have nowadays in the contemporary era, where we're going to have the rich people. Right? Sometimes they're called the capitalists, the business owners. Right? These are going to be the richest of the rich. Some of them are going to be members of a nobility or aristocracy, like in Britain. But it doesn't guarantee if you're, if you're part of an aristocracy, it doesn't guarantee that you're going to be upper class. Because what matters now isn't who you're born to, but how much money does your family have. So if your family's poor, you're not upper class, no matter what title you might own or what noble family you come from. So we have the upper class of capitalists. We have a new middle class that is growing more and more and more than ever before. A large middle class of professional workers. Sometimes they're called white collar workers because these white collar workers have an education. They work in offices. So they could be like doctors and lawyers and, may I say, teachers. Right? So this would be your middle class. Below them are the unskilled laborers. These are what sometimes referred to the blue collar jobs, right? Because it doesn't require a lot of education, a lot of skill working in a factory. And they get paid much less than, of course, the middle class. Below them, you have the unemployed, people who have no jobs and living in the streets. So these are your new social slash economic social classes, right? And these are a creation of the Industrial Revolution. When looking at society, we're going to see that industrialization is going to play a role in the abolition of slavery. Now, we mentioned before in other videos how slavery became less and less popular thanks to the spread and adoption of Enlightenment ideas, right? About equality and freedom and liberty. And those same ideas, as strong as they were and as popular as they were, because people wrote books and listened to lectures and speeches by former slaves like Frederick Douglass, even though those ideas were very, very powerful, there was still an economic incentive or economic reason to keep using slavery, because it produced a lot of cheap goods. And at first, this was actually very good for the Industrial Revolution because you needed a ton of cheap supply of cotton. And that's what the American colonies, right, or the southern states later on, that's what they produced, cheap cotton, or what India produced as well. So as more and more countries become industrialized, including the United States, there is a need to export goods, right? And you want to import raw materials. But you also need to have a domestic market. You need to have people to sell your goods to. People in your own country. So going back with the example of Henry Ford, right, the founder of Ford Motor Vehicles. One of the reasons he lowered his costs, besides that he can sell more, he actually paid his workers pretty good, right, compared to other factories. So working for the Ford company wasn't as bad of a thing as other companies. And the reason why Henry Ford was willing to pay his employees a little bit better than everyone else was because when they get their paycheck, what are they going to save up to buy? Well, they're going to buy a Ford automobile. So factory workers factory owners, start realizing that if they pay their workers enough, those workers are going to purchase the goods that they're manufacturing. So yes, you're going to pay them, but they're going to give some of that money back to you. So it's kind of like a win-win situation. Now, can this happen with slavery? No, because you don't pay the slave anything. So industrialization creates markets for people to buy stuff from factories. But if you continue using slavery, the slaves own nothing, they get paid nothing, therefore they're not going to buy anything. So an economic force that ends slavery is an increased requirement for wage laborers, people who get paid for the work that they do, right? And that's what's going to happen, right? More and more people are going to stop using slave labor, switch to wage labor, because in the long run, wage labor is, equal if not more productive. Because a slave is not going to work as hard when he's not going to get paid. A factory worker is going to work super hard, work overtime, because he knows the harder he works, the more money he's likely to earn. So industrialization helps to end slavery as well. All right, let's look at the effects of the Industrial Revolution on families. So the role and the status of men and women is kind of like this weird situation. It really depends on what social class you're part of. So in the past, right, before Industrial Revolution, men and women worked together at home, right? They worked in, the farm. So even though men had higher status than women, they shared similar roles, right? But what starts happening, especially in the middle class, is that an educated man who's a teacher or a doctor professor, lawyer, whatever, with a career, they're able to earn enough money comfortably to live comfortably as part of the middle class, have a nice house, have nice clothing, go on vacation once in a while, where the wife doesn't have to work at all. So this is this idea that the man becomes the provider of the family. And again, this is nothing new. That's always been the case. But now they have the means to do it. They have the ability to do it because of the economic opportunities for middle class, white collar workers, educated workers. So that means that men become the provider, and therefore women don't have to work, don't have to contribute to the wealth of the family. So their job is to stay at home and be domestic workers, taking care of the kids, taking care of the house. So as women become more and more confined, middle class women, they are confined to the domestic sphere, to the house, to the family, to the home. Men who are economically more active are going to have much more power in society and in politics. Again, none of this is new in the grand scheme of world history, but this becomes more and more common amongst middle class industrial families, right? Where patriarchy is going to actually increase in these families. Now, in working class families, there's kind of like a weird situation because women, working class women, they don't have the luxury of staying at home because their husbands are low skilled and don't earn enough for the entire family. So working class women are going to go work in the factories, for 14 hours a day, then come home and still be expected to clean the house, take care of the kids, cook the meals. So they're going to kind of work double jobs here, double full-time jobs. And again, women working isn't a new thing, but women working for wages, that is a new concept. So what starts happening is at a younger and younger age, women, working class women, start going off to factories to work. Some women, if you're lucky, you don't have to work in a factory. You get to be a maid or a servant, a nanny for a middle class or upper class family. And that was a better job than anything else. So working class women are expected to go to work at a younger age. Now, there's a time period in a working class woman's life where they're working, earning money, and they don't have a family, they don't have a husband. So for a short period of time until they get married, women have some levels of independence. Independence because they don't have to rely on the family nor on a husband. They're on their own and they're working. So working class women have some levels of independence that upper class women will not have. But again, once they settle down, once they get married, once they have kids, that independence disappears because they're once again expected to take on the traditional role of mother and wife. Now, as women are going off to work, the big question is, what are you going to do with the kids? Because in pre-industrial societies, kids lived and worked with the parents. So if you were in a farm and your parents went out to take care of the animals, you went out and you took care of the animals with them. So now we see that because there's no daycare back then, it becomes more and more common for children to go work in the factories as well. So child labor in the early 1800s, especially in the early 1800s, becomes very popular. Right? And again, why are children being forced to work? Well, for one, more than likely the parents, if they're working class, they're not going to be able to pay or support the kids or the whole family. So many times the children are expected to work because they need to, help the family. And on top of that, it becomes kind of like this is your daycare. So once you're 5-6 years old, there's no school. So what do you do all day? Well, you send the kid to the factory. And boom, they get paid and they get entertained and they get to work and someone's supervising them. So child labor becomes very common. It solves a lot of problems for a lot of people, except for the kids who are working and being abused and exploited, and they barely get paid, and they get injured, and they get mutilated with machinery, and they get sick because they're inhaling pollutions and textile fibers that are messing up their lungs. So again, this was a common solution to a family issue: what to do with children, and the answer was, for a long time, put them to work. As early as 4 years old, kids were sending off to work. By the later half of the 19th century, the late 1800s, we see that child labor becomes less common. In fact, British start passing laws restricting work that children can do, or how long they can work, or how little they can get paid, or what type of conditions they are going to need. And then this brings up another question. Well, what do you do with the kids now that they can't work? And the answer, as you can tell by the fact that you go to this, 5 days out of the week, is schools. So the Industrial Revolution creates the need for public education, where everyone gets an education, rich, poor, middle. Now, in the past, you had schools, but they're always private, right? Middle class and upper class people can attend because they can pay for it. But now you have free public education, universal education, and children are going to be attending it. And this also solves a future problem, because as these industrial societies grow wealthier, you're going to need more and more educated people, not unskilled laborers, but educated people, to take on more and more, higher paying jobs. So education is going to serve that service as well, where they're going to, for the future generation, have a generation of educated workers that are going to be in more and more demand over time. All right, so that's it for family and society. I'll see you next time.